Amelie sat across from her old classmate Zinel in a small cafe in Cape Town, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filling the air. At first, they spoke politely, but soon Zinel's voice rose sharp enough for everyone to hear. She laughed cruelly, her words cutting deep. "You're still poor and broken. I always knew you'd never rise." People turned their heads, watching. Amelie's fists tightened under the table, but she didn't fight back. Instead, she lifted her eyes and smiled, a calm smile that carried secrets no one else knew. Zinel leaned closer, smirking as she mocked Amelie's clothes, her shoes, even her future. "You'll end up begging on the streets," she hissed. The cafe grew tense. Waiters slowed their steps, customers exchanged uneasy glances. But Amelie sipped her tea, unshaken, letting Zinel pour out every insult. Then, in a quiet voice, she asked, "Do you really think money is all that defines a person?" Zinel scoffed. "Yes. And clearly, you don't have any." That was the moment. Amelie reached into her bag and slid a brown folder onto the table. She opened it slowly, the paper crisp, her name shining boldly at the top. "This," she said softly, "is the house I just bought. Paid in full. No loans." The cafe froze. Murmurs spread. Zinel's smirk disappeared, her face pale. Amelie stood, her voice steady, "Never mock a seed for being small. One day, it grows into a tree you cannot cut down." And with that, she walked away, leaving silence behind. Would you like me to make this a bit longer and hit exactly 250 words? For 2 years, Amelie lived a life that most people could not imagine. By day, she looked ordinary, a young woman with simple clothes and quiet manners. By night, she worked until her eyes burned, building something brick by brick with nothing but courage, grit, and sleepless nights. She had no rich family to lean on, no powerful friends to call, and no easy shortcuts to take. She started small, renting out tiny flats, learning the hard way about tenants, contracts, and risk. Every mistake cost her tears, but every win made her stronger. Slowly, she grew from renting small spaces to owning buildings. Step by step, deal by deal, she stacked an empire in silence while the world thought she was still struggling. Nobody knew. Not her neighbors, not her old friends, not even her family. To them, Amelie was still the girl who once borrowed textbooks in school because she couldn't afford her own. She kept her victories close to her heart, never bragging, never showing off. She preferred people to underestimate her. It gave her peace. And so, while gossipers laughed behind her back, she quietly signed contracts worth millions. That day in the cafe, sitting across from Zinel, Amelie carried a secret bigger than gold. In her bag, under a neat brown folder, was a document that could silence every cruel word. It was the signed deed to a mansion in Santon, one of the most expensive and elite districts in the country. The house was not on loan, not mortgaged, not borrowed. She had paid for it outright, with her own hard-earned money. The weight of that paper was not just about wealth. It carried every night she cried alone, every rejection she swallowed, every time she ate bread and tea so she could save more for her business. It carried her dignity, her rise from nothing, her proof that faith and hard work can move mountains. As she listened to Zinel's cruel laughter, Amelie's hand brushed the folder inside her bag. She felt the edges of the deed under her fingers and drew strength from it. She didn't need to shout or defend herself. She didn't need to explain her journey to someone who only saw the surface. She knew what she carried. She knew who she had become. In that moment, Amelie realized the power of silence. Let them mock. Let them laugh. One piece of paper, signed and sealed, could change everything. And soon, the whole cafe would see the truth. Do you want me to continue this same style for the rest of the outline so it flows as one complete story? Zinel did not stop. Her eyes roamed over Amelie from head to toe, and her lips curled in disgust. She laughed loudly and said, look at your clothes, still so cheap. Are those shoes second-hand again? You never change. The words came like knives, sharp and cruel, and the cafe grew heavy with silence. Some customers tried to look away, but curiosity pulled their eyes back to the table. Amelie sat still, her hands wrapped around her teacup, the steam rising calmly into the tense air. But Zinel was not finished. She leaned forward and spoke even louder, making sure everyone around could hear. I always knew you'd end up like this. You'll probably be begging on the streets one day. Nothing good will ever come from you. You were born poor, and you will die poor. Her voice carried arrogance, and each word dripped with pride as if crushing Amelie gave her joy. A couple sitting nearby exchanged worried glances, a student at the corner lowered his phone to watch, and even the waiters slowed their steps, pretending to wipe tables while secretly listening. Amelie's jaw tightened, but her face stayed calm. She refused to give Zinel the fire she was trying to spark. Her silence was louder than any insult. She sipped her tea slowly, her eyes steady, her lips lifting just slightly into a smile that unsettled even those watching. The crowd could feel something brewing, something powerful beneath her quietness. Still, Zinel smirked, mistaking Amelie's calm for weakness. She pushed harder, her words sharper, her tone more mocking. You were always the one borrowing books, wearing old uniforms, running after others. Nothing has changed. You'll always be below me. Her laughter rang through the cafe, but it sounded forced, too loud, as if she was trying to convince herself. The tension in the room grew thick. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some whispered to each other, some shook their heads in disbelief at Zinel's cruelty. The storm at the small table was no longer just between two women, it had pulled the whole cafe into its silence and unease. Everyone waited to see if Amelie would finally break. But Amelie sat there, calm as a still ocean, her eyes never leaving Zinel's face. The more Zinel mocked, the more her calm smile spread, a smile that carried secrets, a smile that told of battles already won. And though Zinel did not know it, she was digging her own grave with every word. The cafe could sense it. Something was coming, and no one would forget it. Amelie did not rush to defend herself. She did not raise her voice or throw back the same insults. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, her fingers resting lightly on the warm cup of tea before her. Every sip she took seemed to silence the anger that anyone else in her place might have let loose. Zinel kept spitting her cruel words, but Amelie's calmness only made her look more desperate, more eager to prove herself. People in the cafe watched closely now, drawn in by the strange contrast, one woman throwing poison, the other swallowing it with a smile that refused to fade. Amelie nodded at Zinel's words as if she agreed, letting her talk and talk, her voice rising higher each time. Zinel laughed, waved her hands, and pointed at Amelie's plain clothes again, sure that she had her cornered. But Amelie was not cornered. She was patient. She let the insults pile up, brick by brick, until the weight of them was too heavy for Zinel's own pride to carry. Amelie knew the moment would come, and she was ready. Finally, Amelie set her cup down, her movement slow and deliberate. She looked Zinel straight in the eyes and asked softly, "Do you really think money is all that defines a person?" Her voice was calm, but it cut through the cafe louder than any shout could have. The room went quiet, and all eyes turned toward Zinel. Zinel gave a short, sharp laugh, her lips curling in arrogance. She leaned back in her chair, tossing her hair, and said, "Yes. Of course. And clearly, you don't have any." Her words dripped with mockery, confident that she had won the game. She smirked, satisfied, unaware of the trap she had just walked into. Amelie's smile widened, gentle but unshakable. Inside, her heart beat steady. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when Zinel's pride would set the stage for her downfall. The whole cafe leaned in as if they too felt the shift in the air, as if they knew something powerful was about to happen. Amelie reached slowly for her bag, her movements graceful, controlled, almost theatrical. Her hand brushed the folder inside, the weight of it reminding her of the nights of struggle and the victories no one had seen. She did not rush. She let the silence build, let Zinno's smirk sit heavy on her face, let the crowd's curiosity grow thicker with every second. And then Amelie drew the folder out and placed it gently on the table. Her eyes never left Zinno's, her calm never cracked. The setup was complete, and the trap was closed. The cafe waited, breathless, as the woman who had been mocked and underestimated prepared to turn everything around with a single piece of paper. Amelie's fingers moved slowly as she reached into her bag. The cafe was filled with silence, the kind of silence that carries heavy weight, the kind that makes every sound sharper. The scrape of her chair against the floor, the soft rustle of paper inside her bag, even the faint clink of her bracelet, all of it pulled the crowd closer without a single word being spoken. When her hand came back out, she held a sleek brown folder, polished at the edges, neat and important. She laid it gently on the table, sliding it forward with care, as if she knew the world would shift the moment it was opened. Zinno's smirk stretched wider. She laughed and said loudly, "What is this? Another bill? Another loan? Something to prove you're still broke?" Her voice was mocking, confident, almost certain that whatever Amelie was about to show would only make her look more foolish. But Amelie did not answer. She simply placed her hands on the folder, tapped it once, and then opened it with slow grace, as though she wanted every single person in that cafe to witness what was about to unfold. Inside lay a thick white document, crisp and official. At the top, in bold black letters, was Amelie's name. She turned it slightly so the people nearby could see. The words gleamed with finality: property deed. Paid in full. Her voice was soft, steady, but it rang through the cafe like thunder. "This," she said, her eyes fixed on Zinno, "is the house I just bought. Cash. No loans." The cafe froze. Every chair, every cup, every breath seemed to stop in that moment. A waiter holding a tray paused mid-step, a spoon clinked onto the floor as someone gasped, and phones tilted upward as people realized they were witnessing something unforgettable. The crowd leaned closer, eyes locked on the paper shining under the warm cafe light. Zinno's smirk cracked. Her laughter caught in her throat, choking on disbelief. Her face drained of color, her lips trembled, and her eyes darted back and forth between the document and Amelie's calm, unshaken face. That can't be real," she stammered, but her voice lacked strength, crumbling into whispers. Amelie leaned back, folding her hands calmly in her lap. She did not argue. She did not try to prove herself further. The deed spoke louder than anything she could ever say. Around them, the cafe buzzed with murmurs, the sound of shock spreading like fire. Some people nodded in respect, others raised their brows in awe, and a few even lifted their phones higher to capture every detail. Amelie's calm smile never left her face. Zinno, once loud and arrogant, now sat frozen, her pride shattered. In that moment it was no longer Amelie who looked small, it was Zinno, cornered not by insults but by undeniable truth, exposed in front of everyone by a single piece of paper. The moment the deed lay open on the table, the cafe broke into chaos. At first, there was only silence, heavy and sharp, but then whispers began to rise like waves crashing against rocks. People leaned forward, pointing at the paper, their voices hushed with disbelief. A student sitting by the window dropped his phone, the clatter echoing across the room. Another one fumbled to pick hers up, her hands shaking as she quickly pressed record again, not wanting to miss a single second of what was unfolding. A waiter carrying a tray of drinks stopped in the middle of the floor, his mouth slightly open, eyes fixed on the bold letters of Amelie's name at the top of the deed. Another waiter abandoned his order pad completely, pretending to wipe down a spotless table so he could stay close enough to hear every word. The cafe that had once been filled with the hum of chatter and clinking cups was now a stage, every single person an audience member caught in the drama. Zinno's confidence collapsed in front of everyone. The woman who just moments ago laughed the loudest now sat frozen, her smirk gone, her face pale. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. That can't be real, she stuttered, her voice cracking under the weight of shame. She reached forward as if to touch the deed, then pulled her hand back quickly, afraid of the truth staring back at her. But Amelie did not flinch, did not rush to defend herself, did not even try to argue. She leaned back in her chair, calm as ever, her body language radiating a quiet power that spoke louder than Zinnel's insults ever could. Her presence filled the room, steady and unshaken, drowning out the noise of whispers, gasps, and murmurs. The contrast was striking, one woman collapsing, the other rising without even moving a muscle. The crowd could feel it. Respect for Amelie spread across the room like wildfire. Some people nodded slowly, others smiled faintly, while a few simply shook their heads in disbelief at how the tables had turned so completely. The once smug bully had no words left. For the first time, Zinnel's voice was gone. The same mouth that had spewed insults and laughter now trembled in silence. Her eyes dropped to the floor, unable to meet Amelie's steady gaze. The crowd did not need her to speak, they had already seen enough. And Amelie? She stayed quiet, her hands folded neatly on her lap, her calm smile untouched. She didn't need to explain, she didn't need to prove. The paper on the table had spoken for her. In that cafe, in that moment, the truth was louder than arrogance, and silence had finally silenced the loudest voice. Amelie reached forward with calm hands and closed the folder, her movements slow and deliberate as if she wanted the silence to stretch a little longer. She tucked the deed neatly back into her bag, smoothing the flap as though sealing away her triumph. The cafe was still buzzing with murmurs, phones recording, heads turning, but Amelie looked untouched by it all. She rose from her chair gracefully, her eyes never leaving Zinnel's trembling face. For a moment, no one breathed, waiting to see what she would say. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room with the weight of truth. "Never mock a seed for being small," she said, every word steady and sharp. "Because one day, it grows into a tree you can't cut down." The sentence hung in the air, burning brighter than any shout, more powerful than any insult. People froze in awe, some whispering the words under their breath as if they wanted to remember them forever. Zinnel sat hunched in her chair, her once proud posture now broken. Her hands shook on the table, her eyes darting around, searching for an escape from the gazes of strangers who no longer admired her arrogance. She had walked into the cafe certain of her power, but now she was exposed, humiliated, and stripped of every ounce of pride. She opened her mouth as if to reply, but no sound came out. The same lips that had mocked now trembled with shame. Amelie turned, her calm presence filling the room more than Zinnel's loudest laugh ever had. Each step she took toward the door echoed, and the cafe parted for her like a wave, people pulling back respectfully as though they understood they were watching something greater than just an argument. Her shoulders were straight, her head high, her bag swinging lightly at her side, carrying the proof of her victory. As she reached the door, she paused for just a second, glancing back. Zinnel's eyes were wide, her face pale, her body stiff. The woman who once believed she could crush Amelie with words now sat crushed herself, weighed down by the truth that had unfolded in front of everyone. Amelie pushed the door open, the bell above it chiming softly. Sunlight spilled into the cafe, framing her as she walked out without looking back again. The words she had spoken still lingered like fire in the air, etched into the minds of everyone who had witnessed the scene. Inside, Zinnel sat trembling, exposed before a room full of strangers who now looked at her not with admiration but with pity and disdain. Outside, Amelie walked away with quiet dignity, leaving behind not just the cafe, but also the shadows of her past. The tables had truly turned, and the world had just watched it happen. By evening, the cafe scene had already left the walls of that small shop in Cape Town and entered millions of screens across the world. The moment Amelie laid down the deed, the quiet power in her voice, the way Zinnel's arrogance collapsed in seconds, all of it had been secretly recorded by onlookers. Within hours, the videos flooded social media. People replayed the moment again and again, sharing it with captions like, "This is how you win without shouting," and "The sweetest revenge is success." Amelie's calm face, her soft words, and the powerful line about the seed and the tree were clipped into short reels that spread like fire. Strangers admired how she had carried herself with grace, refusing to fight with insults but instead ending the humiliation with proof that needed no argument. She became a symbol of silent strength, a reminder that true power doesn't need to be loud. Zinel, on the other hand, became a lesson everyone repeated. Memes appeared of her shocked face frozen in disbelief. People laughed at how quickly pride had turned into shame, how the loudest person in the room had been silenced by a single piece of paper. Her name trended, not with admiration, but with mockery. The story grew beyond just two women. It became a story about patience, about dignity, about how sometimes the best response to cruelty is silence until the right moment arrives. Amelie had walked out of that cafe leaving only her words and her smile behind, but by nightfall, the whole world was carrying them forward. One moment of truth had turned into a movement, and Amelie stood tall as the face of resilience.